Hello, I'm Hillel Neuer with UN Watch. We're standing outside the United Nations Human Rights Council chamber. We've just had the quadrennial review of Iran, where the regime presented to the world about its human rights record. And we're joined here with Mohammad Mostafaei, an Iranian human rights lawyer who's defended hundreds of death penalty cases in Iran. And he's, a few years ago, was made to flee Iran because of his human rights work. Today lives in Norway. Welcome, Mohammed.
Thank you.
I wanted to ask you specifically one question, and you could answer in Farsi because we have an interpreter here. You were a lawyer for Rehana Jabari, a 26-year-old woman who was just executed on Saturday. We heard from Iran. Iran talked about this case today because some countries raised it in a discussion. Iran said that Mr. Larijani said that he, the government, didn't want her to be executed. He said he went to the family and he asked them, but the family said no because the West made a media story and the West did propaganda. How did you feel? How did you feel when you heard Iran talking about this case?
و زمانی که آقای لاریجانی عنوان میکنه که ایشون به اعدام محکوم شدن و ما نتونستیم کاری بکنیم ولی تلاش کردیم که ایشون نجات پیدا بکنن، این نشون میده که خب ریحانه یه حقی داشته. بنابراین با توجه به دلایل خیلی زیادی که ما توی این پرونده عنوان کردیم، دفاع مشهور هم صادق بوده توی این پرونده، هم این که ریحانه قصد قتل نداشته.
Okay, so basically, I believe that when Mr. Larijani goes up in front of this International Assembly and announces that the government of Iran tried to negotiate with the family of the deceased to let Rehane live and not be executed, just by this mere action, what the government of Iran is doing is that it is acknowledging the fact that Rehane had certain rights here. But when this case was ongoing, we did many things, and all these many things that we did, they failed, and they blocked us.
و اینکه زمان انتقام گیری قرارهاست که تمام شده و امروز آقای لاریجانی با حرفاش اومد گفت که ما اختیار انتقام گرفتن رو میدیم به افراد و این برخلاف اصول انسانی، برخلاف حقوق بشر است.
Mr. Larijani today, the way he spoke, he basically spoke of a sauce which has to do with revenge. And he basically, what he said was that we give the family of the victim, basically we give them the law to leave the law in their own hands, and that these individuals can make the decision for the execution of another individual, and this is simply medieval, and it is just not right.
Now, on Saturday, the ones who executed Rehana Jabari was the government, yes? It was Iran executed her. If I understood what he was trying to tell us is he, the government, didn't want to execute her. Now, if they didn't want to, did he have to? I mean, if he really didn't want to, couldn't the government have not executed her?
در اصل نمیتونیم بگیم که خب کسی دیگه اعدام کرده. حکم رو که خانواده مخدوم صادر نکرده. حکم رو دادگاه صادر کرده و کسی هم اجرا کننده حکم هم دادگاه است. ولی آمدن برای اینکه خودشون رو مسئولیت خودشون رو کنار بکشن و بیان بگن که نه، در اصل قانون این اختیار رو به اولیای دم داده که اولیای دم قصاص بکنن و ما نمیتونیم کاری انجام بدیم. به نوعی قصاص رو میارن به مسئله شمعیت را میدن. این یه مسئله است که من باهاش موافق نیستم.
So basically, what the Iranians are doing in this case, they are ignoring the fact that it was the justice system of Iran that ran the whole trial and that gave the order, decided that this woman would be executed, and gave the order for the execution and carried it out. And basically this is a fact. So it wasn't the family of the victim who did the whole trial, gave the order, and carried out the execution. So basically what the Iranian government is doing here is that it is trying to put this bigger responsibility on the shoulders of this family, and that is not right.
و اینکه در اصل ایشون مسئله قصاص رو عنوان میکنن که میگن در اسلام قصاص هست و ما نمیتونیم کار کنیم و من پاسخ میدم به اینکه درسته که در اسلام قصاص هست، البته قصاصی هم که در اسلام وجود داره، در قرآن وجود داره، کاملا مخالف با این چیزی که الان اجرا میکنن، ولی مهم اینه که در طبق اصول کیفری، عدالت کیفری، افراد رو زمانی که محاکمه میکنن و محکوم میکنن به خاطر نیت و قصدی که دارن محاکمه میکنن. 95% از پرونده های قتل در ایران در اونها قاتلین قصد قتل رو ندارن، ولی قانونی اجازه رو دادن که اگر قصدم نداشته باشه به اعدام محکوم بشه و این مخالف حتی اسلام هست و ما میتونیم این تعداد آمار قتل رو اعدام ها رو بیاریم پایین.
So basically, the government of Iran, the main argument that they presented today was the argument of qisas, which is basically revenge, and it allows the family of the victim to demand a death sentence for the accused. But there is a big problem with this, and that is that even in Islam and within the Quran, the meaning of qisas is certainly has been open to interpretation, and it all depends on how one interprets it. And the way that the law of Iran has interpreted this act is just not just and not the way it's supposed to be, because the punishment of qisas when it comes to murder, it has to do with the intention of the person who committed the crime. So if we cannot, without reasonable doubt, prove that that person really it was premeditated and that person intended to do that act, then it cannot be carried out. And we can say that maybe more than 95% of the cases that end up with qisas and then lead to execution, this intent cannot be proven properly. And all those numbers and all of those that data, it actually does exist and it can be presented and documented.
و مسئله دیگه اینه که اگر بخوایم باز آمار اعدام ها رو بیاریم پایین، از طریق دیگه هم که وجود داره از بین بردن اعدام در مواد مخدر هست که اون هم شرعی نیست. ما نمیتونیم بگیم مواد مخدر هم شرعی است. بنابراین اگر ما اعدام در قتل رو 95% به این صورت کاهش بدیم و در رابطه با مواد مخدر هم کاهش بدیم، این امکان وجود داره که آمار اعدام ها از همه کشورهایی که الان دارن اعدام میکنن پایین‌تر بیاد.
So one of the main issues that we face today is that we want to reduce the number of executions in Iran. And because of the fact that, again, more than 95 of the cases that have to do with murder, it can be proven that there was no intent. So we can reduce that number by 95%. And then the other side of it is that many people who are executed in Iran, they are executed for crimes that have to do with drugs. Drug dealers, that sort of thing. And one side of it is that it can be argued that according to the Quran and according to Islam, we cannot say that the Quran says that a drug dealer has to be executed. So again, that could be argued out. So that is another way to reduce the number of executions in Iran significantly.
Now, the representative of Iran, Mr. Larijani, said that in this case of Rehana Jabari, there were many lawyers, there were many judges, it took many years, and it was a very fair trial. You were her lawyer. Did she have a fair trial, and if not, why not?
من یقین دارم که ایشون از دادگاه عادلانه برخوردار نبود. علتش هم این هستش که اگر شما حکمی که قاضی صادر کرده بخونید، می‌بینید که تماما دلایلی که به ضرر ریحانه هست رو استفاده کرده. یک قاضی برای اینکه بخواد عدالت رو در نظر بگیره باید هم دلایل متهم رو هم دلایل متهم رو استناد میکنه بهش، هم دلایل شاکی، هم هر دو تا و اینها رو در کنار هم در این پرونده دلایلی که متهم ارائه داده کنار گذاشته شد و چیزایی که ما خواسته بودیم کنار گذاشته شد. فقط دلایل مربوط به ضرر متهم، به ضرر ریحانه رو استناد کرد. یکی این مسئله، یکی این
So basically, what happened in this case is that undoubtedly, the trial of Rehane, even though it took many years, it was not fair. It was not a fair trial. And how we can argue that is that very clearly, when you read what the judge that gave the order for the execution has said, it is that he has considered all of the arguments that the prosecution they have presented against Rehane, and they never really considered all the arguments that the defense lawyers put forward. And one cannot have a fair trial when the whole judgment of it is so one-sided.
و دلیل دیگه این هستش که روز جمعه هفته گذشته به مادر ریحانه زنگ زدن و گفتن که بیایید ریحانه رو ملاقات کنید. روز جمعه روز تعطیل است توی ایران و ریحانه رو برداشتن به یک جایی بردن که مشخص نیست کجاست و به خانواده‌اش هم نگفتن و با تحقیقاتی که من انجام دادم متوجه شدم که اجرای احکام اون رو اعدام نکرد. در اصل اعدامش روی گروه‌های دیگه ریحانه از زمانی هم که بازداشت میشه و تا زمانی که اعدام میشه عنوان میکنه که مخلوق قصد تجاوز به من داشته. یعنی این قصد تجاوز به ریحانه وجود داشته و ریحانه از خودش دفاع کرده و ریحانه هم گفته که یک شخص دیگه بوده به نام شیخی اون پژو مأمور وزارت اطلاعات و مأمور امنیتی معرفی کرده و این سایه امنیتی بودن این پرونده باعث شده که این پرونده در دادگاه عادلانه وجود داشته.
There are just so many things about this case that are extremely unusual. For example, the Friday before Rehane was executed, her mother received a call that from the authorities that told her to come and see her daughter. The thing is that Friday is a holiday month, and by the looks of it, from what we know, is that Rehane was taken to an undisclosed location, and nobody even knew where that undisclosed location was. And again, by the looks of it, from what we know, is that the execution was not carried out by those who normally carry out execution. So it seems like other groups were involved in the executing of Rehane Jawhari. And unlike what the government of Iran has been saying, from day one, Rehane said to everybody that this man wanted to rape her. So this is not something that came up later, unlike what the government wants the world to know. But the fact that this man was connected to intelligence forces in Iran, it just gave this whole case a different kind of dimension, and it made the authorities extremely sensitive and secretive about it.
Now, to go back in a bit more of a global question, you were just here for 3 hours. You heard Iran present for a very long time, Mohammad Larijani and others, about how much progress they're achieving on human rights. You also heard from many countries of the world, Bangladesh, Yemen, Syria, and others, praising Iran for its human rights record, for progress, and for doing such a good job on human rights. As someone who worked on cases of victims, how did this experience here today, how did it make you feel?
خب این یه چیز طبیعی هستش که کشورها به دو دسته تقسیم میشه. کشورهایی که همیشه مدافع حقوق بشر بودن، ایران رو محکوم کردن و کشورهایی که خودشون حقوق بشر رو به نوعی نقض میکنن، اونها اومدن طرفداری کردن.
Well, it is kind of natural that when you have a situation like this, that countries who have always defended human rights and have a record of defending human rights, they would support human rights. And then you would have the countries that have a terrible human rights record, that they would actually support the perpetrator, which in this case is Iran.
و مسئله دیگه اینه که همون کشورهایی که محکوم نکردن و طرفداری کردن اونها به استناد کردن به گزارشی که آقای لاریجانی تقدیم شورا کرده و در اون گزارش خیلی دروغ هم وجود داره. مثلا بیشتر موضوعاتی که مطرح بود بر موضوع قانون موجود اسلامی جدید بود، در حالی که قانون موجود اسلامی جدید به مراتب بدتر از قانون موجود قبلی. هیچ تغییری به غیر از کودکان، حقوق کودکان، هیچ تغییری در رابطه با مسائل دیگه صورت نگرفته و بدتر هم شده.
So basically, the countries that we saw today stand up for Iran and defend it. They relied heavily on the document that Iran has presented to the UN. And when we read that document carefully, we see that a lot of it is just downright lies. So in this document, Iran has argued that the new criminal codes, they are an improvement when it comes to human rights to the old laws. And when we actually look at them carefully, we discover that they are not better, but they are actually worse. The only improvement in the new criminal code is that it treats children a little bit better when it comes to crimes. But for everybody else, it's actually become worse.
و یک نظر دیگر عنوان کردن تصویب منشور حقوق بشر که قرار هست انجام بشه. در صورتی که مثلا نیازی نداریم به تصویر منشور حقوق بشری که اینها دارن روش کار میکنن، تصویر منشور حقوق شهروندی. ما در حدود 10 سال پیش یه قانونی به تصویب رسوندیم به نام قانون حفظ آزادی‌های مشروط و در اون قانون خیلی از قوانینی که مدافع حقوق متهمین هست وجود داره. اون رو هم اجرا نمی‌کنه. مثلا این منشور حقوق شهروندی اصلا همه چیزایی که تو قانون جدید ما وجود داره. بنابراین این هم یه نوع کلک به اعضای شورا.
Basically, some of these new rights that new laws that they have been referred to in this document that was presented to the UN on behalf of Iran, they argue about the new laws that have to do with the human rights and basic rights of Iranian citizens. And but the problem with this, the lie, the deceit here is that laws that